welcome to Differently Branded, a podcast brought to you by Disbranded, a creative agency for the disability sector here in Australia. And this podcast's ambition is to support disability organisations create better, less cringy branding and make people with disability feel a little bit cooler about taking on supports. My name is Tommy Trout. I'm the founder and creative director of Disbranded. And today I want to talk to you about the logos we use. So, in previous podcasts, we looked at the words, person-centered, holistic, empowering, and all the providers we looked at use those words to the letter. We counted the photos. We looked at the wheelchair at the low angle, hand on the shoulder, the same bloody stock image used by a dozen different organisations. So now let's look at the logos. More specifically, let's look at the logo marks. And what we found was hearts, love hearts. So many love hearts. Why are there so many love hearts? So, spend an afternoon at a disability expo, or even just scroll through a Google search results for NDIS providers in my local area, and you'll start to notice the same shapes repeating with an almost hypnotic consistency. Love hearts, pairs of hands, often cupped or outstretched, smiling faces, and trees. For reasons that genuinely no one has ever been able to explain, I do not understand this, the disability sector has collectively decided that trees and branches and leaves mean something. Sometimes these elements combine. A heart inside a pair of hands is a common hybrid. A smiling face inside a circle is another. A tree whose branches form a heart might be the complete set. But maybe outstretched hands with smiles reaching out to a tree with a love heart would complete the set. And if it doesn't exist yet, give it time. The question worth asking is, how did we get here? And the more pointed version of that question is, has anyone even asked for this? Here is something that we need to embrace and remember as a sector, and that is that no NDIS participant has ever called a service provider and said, I really want to work with you, but the lack of love hearts is really making me concerned that you can't do the job. How do I know that the person who is driving me to an appointment and helping me shop truly loves me? Nobody has ever selected a provider because of a cupped hands logo mark. Nobody has ever felt more supported, more seen, or more respected because the organisation serving them had a tree in their branding. If that's the closest they get to good service, then branding is the least of your problems. The hearts are not for participants. The hearts were never for participants. They are for the people who were never participants in the first place. The visual language of the disability sector did not emerge from any coherent strategy or genuine creative thinking. It emerged from the charitable model that preceded the NDIS by decades. Before consumer-directed funding, disability services were largely delivered by charities and not-for-profits that depended on philanthropists, government grant committees, and community donors for their survival. These organisations needed to communicate warmth, compassion, and moral purpose to the people writing the checks, which were overwhelmingly not the people receiving the services. The love heart in this context begins to make sense. It tells a donor that this organisation is kind. It signals to a grant assessor that the people running it care. It performs virtue for an audience whose goodwill and financial support is the whole point of the exercise. The NDIS shifted the funding model entirely. Participants became the customers. Funding followed the individual rather than the organisation. The whole premise of the scheme was that people with disability should drive the market through their purchasing decisions, not the passive recipients of whatever services happen to be available to them, if any. But the logos haven't changed. The hearts have stayed, because once you have a heart in your logo, replacing it requires you to ask why it was there in the first place, and the honest answer to that question can be uncomfortable. Not knowing what to put in its place is actually revealing. If a disability organisation removes the heart from its logo and has no idea what genuine visual identity might replace it, that usually means it has been thinking about its participants only as care and service recipients, rather than customers with preferences, taste, self-esteem, and the right to choose an organisation that actually interests them. Here's a piece of design history that the disability sector has pretty much missed entirely and could have learned from. Logo marks. The symbolic icons that sit alongside or in place of a name were not invented for aesthetics. Well, not just aesthetics. They were also invented for accessibility. Before widespread literacy, businesses identified themselves through images rather than text. A pub called the Red Anchor hung a red anchor outside so that a person who could not read knew what they were walking into. The visual symbol carried the meaning independently of the words. It was a navigation tool, a wayfinding device, a way of helping people who needed it most find what they were looking for. The origin story has obvious and direct relevance to the disability sector. A genuinely distinctive logo mark means something profound to a person with low literacy, or an acquired brain injury, an intellectual disability, or anyone navigating a complex system while managing significant cognitive load. A distinct, memorable visual symbol can help someone identify and differentiate their provider in a way that a name alone never could. The disability sector has inherited this accessibility, opportunity, and almost universally squandered it. A love heart communicates nothing differentiating. If every provider has a heart, the heart stops functioning as a navigational tool entirely. It cannot help anyone identify the organisation because it is indistinguishable from every other heart on every other sign on every other brochure in the room. If your participants cannot pick you out of a lineup, your logo is not doing its job. In an industry that talks constantly about inclusion and accessibility, designing a logo mark that actively fails the people who most benefit from clear visual identification and differentiation is a significant miss. I have seen this play out in the other direction. There was first my business, WeFlex, which invested heavily, not just in branding, but in not looking like a disability provider. We wanted to be a fitness brand, and within our first year, we were selling branded merch. We also had a second client, a client of ours, that was in the same position. They rebranded, had a very cool non-disability looking brand created, and they're now in a position where participants are asking for shirts and offering to pay for them. Disability organisation with a brand distinctive enough that participants want to wear it, carry it, and represent it on the street. Two organisations in a sector drowning in identical hearts, both managing to build something that participants choose to display on their bodies and in their own time. It's not a coincidence. It's what happens when you stop designing for donors and funders and for the commission and for referrals and start designing for the people you actually serve. So, what does good look like? So, the advice here is not subtle and it's not too complicated. Honestly, go for something daring. Commission a logo mark that is properly designed by a person, that is genuinely bold, or at least at minimum actually different from the hands, hearts, smile, tree lineup that constitutes the sector's current visual vocabulary. If your logo can be swapped into a competitor's letterhead without anyone really noticing, it isn't a logo, it's a placeholder. It's a waste of space. True to your services is worth unpacking. This doesn't mean illustrative and literal. A logo for a mobility service doesn't need a wheelchair, and a mental health support service doesn't need a brain. It means the visual character of the mark reflects something genuine about how your organisation operates and who it is for. Bold organisations can have bold logos. Calm and clinical organisations can have precise, minimal marks. The logo mark should feel like the brand it represents. To customers, it should feel like the start of something new and better. And if the question that comes up in your next board meeting or team discussion is whether it's too risky to move away from the heart, ask yourself who is in that room making that decision, whether any of the people in your organisation actually serves were even consulted before you arrived at the cautious conclusion to not change. The hearts told the philanthropist that you were kind. Your participants already know whether you were kind. What they deserve to know is whether you are worth choosing. What they deserve to know is what you see in them. If you find this podcast and my diatribe interesting, please leave a comment, a like, a subscribe, all that goodness. It helps my offering to the algorithm gods. It helps get this feed or my podcast in front of more people. I really do appreciate your support in helping me become, I think, last check, number 41 in Australia for marketing. Woohoo. Genuinely happy about that. Now the competitive side of me is coming out. Thank you again for listening to the podcast. It is a weekly-ish podcast released every Monday here in Australia time, whenever I get around to it. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.